Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Gravitas. I'm Shreya Upadhyay. Let's get started. Well, tonight on Gravitas, we talk about the big WION impact after WION questioned Marco Rubio on racism against India and Indians in the United States. The U.S. Secretary of State called those people stupid, but clarified that Donald Trump loves India. The big question is, has Rubio been able to do what many thought he would? Recalibrate ties with India. We're decoding this for you tonight. We also continue to focus on the potential deal between Iran and America. Neither side is giving clarity and both sides are ready to pull the trigger whenever it's needed. Which way does it go from here? And the Russia-Ukraine war has now entered a more dangerous phase. Russia has used one of the most destructive weapons from its arsenal. We get you more details on the show tonight. Did Marco Rubio call his boss Donald Trump stupid? Well, this has been the biggest question that the entire world has been asking after WION questioned the United States Secretary of State in New Delhi. My colleague Siddhant Sibal asked him a simple and a legitimate question. What do you have to say about the racist comments made against India and Indians in America? Rubio's response left more to the imagination than he would have liked. Let's play that interaction for you once again.
A lot of racist comments coming from the United States against Indians, Indian Americans. So this goes against the basic principles of India-U.S. relationship. What's your take on that?
I don't know how to address that, but I'll take that very seriously about the comments. Look, I'm sure that there are people that have made comments online and other places because every country in the world has stupid people. I'm sure there are stupid people here. There are stupid people in the United States that make dumb comments.
Now, while Rubio and the State Department were still absorbing what had happened, the State Department quietly deleted their post on X. And then the U.S. Secretary of State gave out this clarification earlier today.
Question you got yesterday on racist comments about
I don't know who he was talking about, but I assumed that he's talking about like people posting stuff online. I don't even know. Some of those could be a troll or could be a bot. I don't know. So that's why I asked him specifically, can you tell me what you're talking about and who you're talking about? He didn't have a specific example.
Something was reposted by the president where he was talking about India being quote-unquote.
Well, I gave him a chance to tell me that. That's not what he said. The president loves India. He said it last night. Were you guys there when he called in for the event last night, the 250? The president's a big fan of India, a big fan of Prime Minister Modi. I wouldn't be here if the president didn't want me to be here. He cares. He wouldn't have sent someone like Sergio to be our ambassador, someone who's very close to the president.
Now remember, Marco Rubio's comment came hours after Donald Trump, the U.S. president, said that he loves India and he loves Narendra Modi during a phone call. Take a look.
I love India. I love India. Just want to say hello to everybody. I love the Prime Minister. Modi is great. He's my friend.
In fact, a day earlier, Rubio had invited Prime Minister Modi to the White House on behalf of President Donald Trump. Now, Marco Rubio's India visit, which is still underway, is being touted as a repair mode visit. In fact, not just repair, but also recalibrate what India and America have lost out on since the ties became strained under Trump's second presidency. revive the Quad grouping, which many say is dead, and reinforce the India-U.S. ties. So has Marco Rubio been able to repair or recalibrate the ties? Well, let's go one by one. Number one is trade. Trade has arguably been the most politically sensitive issue between India and America. Marco Rubio, as expected, spoke about the trade deal during his visit. India, remember, wants relief from tariffs, deeper access to the American markets, and more investment in manufacturing, especially after a recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling struck down some of Trump's tariff actions. So far, Marco Rubio has only spoken about how this trade deal would benefit the American farmers and businesses. Energy is the second most important agenda of this visit. India has unfairly been at the receiving end of Donald Trump's pressure. Even though extra tariffs for buying Russian oil have been removed, U.S. officials have signaled that Washington wants to expand its share of India's energy market, especially in oil and liquefied natural gas. This, for the U.S., leads to the wider effort of curbing sources of revenue for Russia. For India, meanwhile, the agenda is not just around where to get oil from. It's also about the price, about long-term contracts, all while ensuring that India's strategic autonomy sustains. Reviving the Quad comes in at number 3. Marco Rubio has been praising the Quad. On Tuesday morning, that's the 26th of May, India, United States, Australia and Japan will hold the Quad foreign ministers meeting. Now, this grouping began as a key platform for cooperation on maritime security, supply chains, and regional strategy. But many are now asking, is it relevant in 2026? Well, for India and America, it has to stay relevant. India becomes part of a major alliance with economic powers minus China. The Indian effort to ensure an expansionist China stays in control is boosted by the Quad. For United States, on the other hand, remember, Quad serves as a deterrent against its competitor China, which continues to expand its military and economic influence in the Indo-Pacific. Rubio's presence at the Quad foreign ministers meeting will signal continued U.S. engagement, even though the grouping has not elevated itself to regular leader summit yet. An irritant in the ties has been Trump's growing proximity with Pakistan's Asim Munir as well. Here's what Rubio said today on a question of Pakistan.
They're concerned about the things they're always concerned about, obviously. India is always pointing to the fact that there are armed terrorist groups operating from Pakistani territory that target India. They're always concerned about that. But as far as the role they played as a mediator and a facilitator in the Iran situation, that never came up. I don't think that they would complain about that. I mean, their issues with Pakistan are different.
Now, even though the United States insists that its ties with both India and Pakistan are separate, the way it deals with the two countries has largely been guided by the reported cryptocurrency and critical mineral deals catalyzed by Pakistan. Here's why I say that. Donald Trump has been much harsher with India on tariffs and energy despite good relations. But Trump went a complete 360 degrees reverse in how he dealt with Pakistan in his earlier term and how he deals with them now. So, would you call Trump's I Love India and Narendra Modi as recalibration? Would you say that the Quad meeting is a resetting of ties? Or do you think that the massive loss of trust that Indians feel with America today is testimony of the long time that it will take to recover? Well, the answer is not going to be so easy. Right, shifting our focus now is a U.S.-Iran agreement proving to be elusive once again. Even as the negotiations continue, Iran has stressed that its fingers are on the trigger. On the other hand, U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened Iran of an escalation once again if it doesn't agree on a deal. The anticipation has been building since the last 48 hours. At 4:30 p.m. Washington time on Saturday last, Donald Trump claimed that an agreement has largely been negotiated and it will be announced shortly. 17 hours later, Trump changed his tune. saying that US will not be rushed into the negotiations. In fact, he also noted that the naval blockade of Iran will remain in place until an agreement is reached. Now, Donald Trump's frustration came to the fore once again a few hours earlier when he warned Iran of resuming military operations. He said, and I'm quoting him here, "It will only be a great deal for all or no deal at all." According to him, the deal being negotiated currently will be the exact opposite of the 2015 JCPOA deal signed during Barack Obama's tenure as the president, which he claimed paved the way for Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. Trump also urged countries like Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Turkey, Jordan, Egypt, and Qatar to join the Abraham Accords when the United States signs an agreement with Iran. Among the Gulf nations, the UAE and Bahrain have already signed this pact that normalizes ties with Israel. Trump has also expressed hope that Iran will join the Abraham Accords. However, Tehran has not given any indication of this so far. Similarly, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has termed the deal a work in progress. While saying that America is going to give diplomacy every chance to succeed, he left the scope open for resuming military action against Iran.
This issue, no one has done more, and no one has been more serious about the threat of a nuclear Iran than President Trump has been. And so I'm very confident, and we should all be very confident, that we're either going to have a good agreement or we're going to have to deal with it another way. We'd prefer to have a good agreement.
Iran, though, remains unfazed by the U.S. pressure. A day earlier, swaths of Iranians waved flags and chanted slogans during a ceremony organized by the IRGC to pay tribute to the victims of the wars with U.S. and Israel. On this occasion, Mojtaba Khamenei's senior advisor, General Mohsen Rezai, threatened that the Iranian armed forces have their fingers on the trigger and warned that the war could expand to the Red Sea, Bab al-Mandeb Strait, and the Indian Ocean. Iran's foreign ministry, though, conceded that Tehran and Washington have reached an understanding on many issues. At the same time, it dismissed the claim that an agreement with the U.S. is imminent.
Of the negotiations is on ending the war, and at this stage we are not discussing the details of the nuclear issue. Threats, pressure, portrayals, and the publication of caricatures are part of political maneuvering on the other side of the world.
Amid this, Iran's Fars news agency claimed that Iranian forces shot down a hostile drone over the Persian Gulf with Arshe-Kamangir, which it described as a new interceptor system with hidden abilities. On the diplomatic front, a delegation led by Iran's key negotiator Mohammad Ghalibaf arrived in Qatar as part of the diplomatic process to end the war. The delegation included Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi as well as the central bank governor Abdul Nasser Hemmati. Now remember, Iran has been pushing for the release of its frozen funds abroad as well. Now, one of the major obstacles in a potential deal appears to be the Strait of Hormuz, as its virtual closure has triggered a major energy crisis globally. While Donald Trump claimed that this strategic waterway will be reopened after the deal is signed, Iran's foreign ministry said that the agreement has no specific details on the management of Hormuz. Now, even as it denied charging tolls, it revealed that Tehran is now collecting fee for navigational services from ships that transit the Hormuz. But the U.S. has consistently opposed such an arrangement. Both sides continue to assert its control over the Hormuz. For instance, remember, CENTCOM has claimed that it has redirected hundreds of commercial ships seeking to enter or exit Iranian ports as part of its naval blockade so far. The IRGC Navy stated that 117 vessels had crossed Hormuz between Tuesday and Saturday last week in coordination with its forces. The other key point of contention, remember, remains the nuclear issue. While Donald Trump continues to insist on not compromising over Iran handing over enriched uranium, Iran has ruled out discussing it at this juncture, thereby raising doubts over the viability of this deal. So where does this leave Netanyahu? Well, it's proving to be a slippery slope for Trump. While Iran has stressed that stopping war on all fronts, including Lebanon, will be part of the potential agreement between the two nations, Israel has continued to bomb South Lebanon to target Hezbollah. After speaking to Trump, Netanyahu claimed that the U.S. president affirmed Israel's right to defend itself against threats from Lebanon. However, it remains to be seen whether Trump will risk putting a deal with Iran in jeopardy to placate Netanyahu. With no clear timeline in sight for a possible US-Iran agreement, the world remains on tenterhooks even as clamor grows for lasting peace in West Asia. From one war to the other, the war in Ukraine has now entered a more dangerous phase. Russia's used one of the most destructive weapons from its arsenal. The nuclear-capable Oreshnik has left a trail of destruction. Moscow says that the attack was in retaliation to the Ukrainian attack on a school in Russian-controlled town of Starobilsk. At such a critical moment, the UK and France have rejected the NATO plan to increase military aid to Ukraine. Our next report gets you all the details.
This is the horror unleashed by Russia. Entire apartments reduced to rubble. Ukraine says overnight on May 24th, Russia launched 90 missiles and 600 drones in an attack that lasted several hours, making the attack one of the largest in the last 1 year. This is not routine escalation. Ukraine struck targets inside Russia. Moscow answered with a barrage that included Oreshnik, a multi-warhead ballistic missile built to pierce defenses. The Oreshnik is not a small weapon. Multiple warheads complicate missile defenses. Fragments rain across multiple sites. The Oreshnik is believed to travel at speeds exceeding Mach 10 or nearly 12,000 kilometers per hour, drastically reducing the reaction time available to defending forces. Russia says that this is Starobilsk Professional College in eastern Ukraine under Russian control, which was deliberately targeted by Kyiv. According to Russia, 21 students were killed in the strike. Ukraine has denied targeting civilians, insisting that it had hit a Russian drone unit stationed in the area. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, vows that Russian forces should strike Ukraine again with same ferocity for targeting innocent civilians. At the same time, NATO governments argue behind closed doors. A plan to ramp up military aid to Ukraine has hit resistance. Britain and France rejected a proposal to increase deliveries now. Their calculus is political and strategic. Leaders weigh escalation risks, domestic fatigue, and alliance cohesion. Allies fear a wider war if support is ramped too fast. Ukraine fears a pause will cost lives and territory. None of this means the alliance is abandoning Ukraine, but it does suggest that the conflict is becoming more complex, more expensive, and potentially more unpredictable. On the battlefield, both sides are reaching for more dangerous weapons, and when stronger weapons meet growing political uncertainty, the risks of miscalculation only increase. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
بيننا.
Hezbollah's drones are piercing Israeli defenses and forcing the IDF to adapt on the battlefield. The threat has been growing, the attacks are intensifying, and Israel's soldiers in northern front are now under mounting pressure. A video released by Hezbollah showing FPV kamikaze drones hitting Israeli military positions in southern Lebanon's Rashaf. This footage shows strikes on at least 2 Merkava Mk4 tanks, armored bulldozers, heavy trucks and Humvees. Now, Hezbollah's drone warfare continues to be one of the most, if not the most serious, tactical threat facing Israel on the Lebanon front. The challenge has become so severe that Israeli soldiers deployed in southern Lebanon reportedly contacted fishermen around the Sea of Galilee, asking for fishing nets to help shield military positions from explosive drone attacks. Well, reports suggest that the move was an initiative by the troops and not part of an official IDF procurement process. The Israeli military has reportedly experimented with shade nets, football nets and fishing nets to stop the incoming drones. And Israel is not alone. Ukraine has been using repurposed fishing nets as a low-cost, low-tech defense to intercept and neutralize Russian drones, particularly first-person view and Lancet drone models. The IDF is said to be working on a standardized anti-drone protection system for buildings, for vehicles, and fortified positions. Israel has also reportedly created a specialist task force involving the military, defense, and civilian experts to counter the growing drone threat. Now, the urgency, remember, follows a series of major attacks over the past 1 week. An Israeli staff sergeant was killed in an explosive drone strike near the Lebanese border, while the commander of the IDF's 401st Brigade was also severely wounded in another drone attack. In total, in fact, at least 10 Israeli soldiers were injured in Hezbollah's drone strikes, while the overall, at least 22 Israeli soldiers have died since the latest fighting with Hezbollah began. The issue is also becoming political. Yonatan Shalev, who's contesting the upcoming elections with Naftali Bennett's Together party, claimed that the reports were true. He said that he had narrowly survived an explosive drone strike on the building where his unit was stationed in Lebanon. On the other hand, Hezbollah chief Naim Qassem has lauded the group's drone capabilities and rejected calls for disarmament.
Disarmament is annihilation, and we will not accept it. Disarmament means stripping Lebanon of its defensive capability and the capability of the resistance, Hezbollah, and people, paving the way for annihilation.
Now, Israel says that Hezbollah's FPV drones are becoming increasingly difficult to stop because they're remotely operated through fiber optic cables, making electronic jamming extremely difficult and easier for them to dodge detection. They're susceptible to windy conditions as it can lead to cables to tangle. Unlike conventional missiles or rockets, these drones are far cheaper to produce. The estimated cost of each drone is between $300 and $500. In fact, some drones can also be modified and armed with RPG-style anti-tank warheads. The drones can also be made from commercially available and 3D printed components. Now, these low-cost drones can destroy high-value military targets, and they've also been used extensively in the Russia-Ukraine war. According to Israel's public broadcaster, Kan, Hezbollah's drone operations are now limiting nearly 80% of Israeli attacks in southern Lebanon. The report says that the drones have restricted troop movement and forced some Israeli operations to avoid daylight hours due to fears of drone surveillance and attacks. In fact, the broadcast also reported that anti-drone systems are being distributed to only a limited number of Israeli troops because of supply shortages. Hezbollah has also reportedly moved away from a centralized command structure, and they're increasingly relying on guerrilla-style warfare tactics, making IDF's anti-drone operations less effective. Meanwhile, the criticism over the rising violence by Jewish settlers in West Bank has been mounting. And now, in an embarrassment for the Netanyahu government and in what is a clear contrast in the stances of the Prime Minister and the President, Israel's President Isaac Herzog has delivered an unusually harsh indictment, warning that extremist behavior is being normalized and even celebrated by some. Addressing the annual Jerusalem Unity Prize Award ceremony, Herzog sharply condemned Israeli settler violence in West Bank as brutishness carried out by an anarchist mob. As per reports, he opined that these acts defile and violate every basic moral, legal and Jewish norm. He also lamented that the IDF often spends most of their time in West Bank dealing with the Jewish rioters. According to reports, the Israeli president has stressed that it must be forbidden to abuse prisoners irrespective of how terrible their crime is. Now, this was perceived as an indirect reference to Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, tormenting activists who were detained from the global Sumut flotilla, the visuals of which had gone viral. Meanwhile, Ben-Gvir took umbrage at Herzog's comments and he called for his ouster. He said, and I'm quoting him here, "A president of a country who calls hundreds of thousands of citizens of the state of Israel beasts is not fit to be president." This comes at a time when the situation in West Bank has deteriorated significantly. For instance, last week, Jewish settlers set fire to vehicles in the city of Halhul and sprayed graffiti on the walls of houses.
1 week between the 12th and the 18th of May, OCHA documented at least 49 attacks by Israeli settlers that caused casualties or damage, including a rise in arson attacks against homes, farmland, vehicles, and a mosque.
As per the United Nations, over 870 attacks by Jewish settlers, that is an average of 6 attacks per day, have been recorded in West Bank since the beginning of this year. At least 49 Palestinians have been killed so far. Overall, 1,095 Palestinians have been killed in West Bank from October 7, 2023 till May 13th of this year. This includes 240 children as well. And this has become an issue on the global stage. Last week, leaders of 6 countries, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, and Australia, as well as New Zealand, condemned the settler violence in West Bank. They urged the Israeli government to end its expansion of settlements in West Bank and ensure accountability for settler violence. In fact, they also opposed members of the Israeli government seeking forcible displacement of Palestinians. A long time ago, most of the world's biggest companies came from Europe and America. They built famous car brands, steel giants, technology firms, and pharmaceutical companies that dominated global markets for decades. In fact, countries like India were largely seen as consumers of those very products and not owners of those global brands. But a new India is changing that equation. India's economic rise over the past 3 decades has been one of the most remarkable growth stories of modern world. From being known as a developing economy, struggling with shortages, slow growth, and limited global influence, India has now transformed itself into one of the fastest growing major economies on the planet. Today, India is the world's 4th largest economy by nominal GDP, with an economy valued at nearly $4.15 trillion and an ambitious roadmap to become a $5 trillion economy by 2027. In late April this year, Sun Pharmaceuticals announced an $11.75 billion deal to acquire New York-listed women's health and biosimilars company, Organon & Corporation. Now, this deal was part of a much larger trend. In recent months alone, Tata Motors has acquired Italy-based commercial vehicle giant Iveco. And these acquisitions are happening across sectors, from automobiles and tech to pharmaceuticals, telecom, retail, metals, and mining. Let's quickly get to a closer look. India's automobile sector is no longer just manufacturing vehicles for the world now. It is owning some of the world's most iconic automotive brands. Tata Motors made global headlines when it acquired luxury British brands Jaguar and Land Rover from more recently. The company expanded further by acquiring the Italian commercial vehicle maker Iveco Group. Eicher Motors brought the legendary Royal Enfield brand. Mahindra & Mahindra acquired the historic British motorcycle brand BSA to revive one of the oldest names in motorcycling. And TVS Motor Company acquired premium British superbike manufacturer Norton Motorcycles. India has long been called the pharmacy of the world, and Indian healthcare companies are now expanding aggressively overseas as well. Sun Pharmaceutical Industries announced the massive acquisition of Organon & Co. and in fact strengthening its global position in women's healthcare and biosimilars. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories expanded its footprint in the U.S. by acquiring the generic formulations portfolio of Mind Pharma. India's technology sector has been moving rapidly as well, from outsourcing to ownership now. Coforge acquired Silicon Valley-based AI and digital engineering company Encora. Wipro strengthened its consulting business with the acquisition of the UK-based financial consultancy firm Capco. HCL Technologies, another one. They expanded globally by acquiring multiple software assets from IBM, including Lotus Notes and Celerity Fintech. Not just this, remember, Indian companies are making major moves in telecom and consumer retail as well. Bharti Airtel, for starters, acquired a significant stake in Britain's BT Group and earlier expanded into Africa through the acquisition of Zain Africa. Some of India's biggest global acquisitions have come from the metals and mining sector. Tata Steel acquired Anglo-Dutch steel giant Chorus Group in one of India's most high-profile international takeover deals. Hindalco Industries acquired Canada-based Novelis, helping the company become one of the world's leading aluminium producers. What we are witnessing today is much bigger than a series of business deals. It is the rise of India as a global economic force. All right, shifting our focus now, 47 people are dead after a devastating bomb attack near a railway station in Pakistan's restive Balochistan province. Now, this blast has been the latest in a string of deadly attacks that continue to challenge Islamabad's authority in the region. And it raises a difficult question for Pakistan's military leadership. Is Balochistan slipping further out of control? Take a look.
The devastating reality of this crisis exploded near the Quetta railway station, where a massive blast ripped through a crowd of passengers and security personnel, leaving over 45 people dead and dozens injured. The Baloch Liberation Army claimed responsibility for the carnage, asserting that 82 Pakistani soldiers were killed in the targeted strike. This lethal operation highlights a monumental intelligence breakdown that has left the civilian population completely defenseless.
After going outside following the blast, we saw chaos everywhere. A crying mother was searching for her son, but he had already reached the hospital. On the other side, vehicles were engulfed in intense fire. Screams for help were coming from the train compartments ahead.
When I came out of the room, I saw that the house's gate was destroyed. A goat had been tied to the gate and it had fallen down due to the blast. It was a very powerful explosion. When I looked outside, there was fire and smoke everywhere.
The blast occurred while the train was travelling through Chaman Phatak station in Quetta. The train travels from Quetta to Peshawar, a route where security forces are usually stationed. It is not the first time that the BLA has targeted trains in Balochistan. Militants hijacked a train and took a number of passengers hostage while en route to Peshawar in March 2025. The explosion killed over 30 people and injured more than 100 others. There have been numerous such attacks by the BLA. For years, Islamabad treated Baloch dissent as a small law and order problem. Field Marshal Asim Munir dismissed the movement as marginal. He said about 1,500 militants could not alter the nation's course. Now, his words echo back at him. Munir is now facing fierce domestic condemnation inside Pakistan for ignoring his own burning country, for focusing his attention on courting the Trump administration instead of addressing the spiraling security vacuum at home. The roots of this unstoppable violence lie in decades of deep systemic deprivation as the Baloch people watched the state extract immense wealth from their resource-rich land while leaving the locals in absolute poverty. To make matters worse, Islamabad continues to blindly oblige Beijing by forcing through controversial China-Pakistan economic corridor projects, which locals view as outright corporate colonization that steals their birthright. By prioritizing foreign masters and ignoring local grievances, the Pakistani establishment has pushed an entire population to the brink, leaving the state with no viable way to regain control. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
The possibility of a biological attack is no longer now limited to a secret lab. A rogue scientist or a terror network with years of training can actually make that happen. Experts now warn that the kind of information once locked inside high-security facilities could be reaching anyone with access to certain AI chatbots. From modifying deadly pathogens to spreading them in crowded public spaces, scientists warn that some AI chatbots are capable of guiding users through the steps of carrying out a biological attack, risking the lives of millions across the globe. Now, one of those warnings comes from Dr. David Relman, a Stanford microbiologist and biosecurity expert who's advised the U.S. government on biological threats. Relman told the New York Times that he was hired by an AI company to test a chatbot before its public release when the conversation took a disturbing turn. According to him, the chatbot explained how a known pathogen could be altered to resist available treatments. He told New York Times that the system also identified a security weakness in a major public transport network and suggested how an attack could be carried out to maximize casualties while reducing the chances of getting caught. The scientist said that the chatbot was providing ideas and strategies he had not even asked for. He refused to identify the company behind the system because of a confidentiality agreement, but he did say that some safety restrictions were added after his testing. Other scientists also highlighted how chatbots gave detailed explanations on how to buy raw genetic material, turn it into deadly weapons, and deploy them in public spaces, while also listing out ways to evade detection. The warnings by scientists come against the backdrop of past biological attacks globally, including during World War II and by cults in Japan during the 1990s. In fact, in 2001, anthrax-laced letters killed 5 people in the United States and led to panic across the country. Experts now warn that artificial intelligence could make such dangerous knowledge about biological weapons far more accessible. And such instances have surfaced globally, including here in India. Last year, Gujarat police arrested a doctor who was accused of plotting an attack linked to the Islamic State. Investigators told the New York Times that he used AI-powered searches and chatbots while seeking information on extracting ricin, which is a lethal toxin. And the danger goes beyond biological weapons. Last year, researchers found that an AI model could provide detailed instructions on how to bomb a sports stadium, including security weak points, explosive recipes, and methods to cover the tracks. Still continuing about artificial intelligence, well, AI has become an inevitable reality of our lives. Firms across the world are now heavily investing into AI, and they're even cutting down on jobs as a result. However, a top tech executive's revelation about the cost of artificial intelligence itself has come into focus. Remember earlier, Brian Catanzaro, the vice president of applied deep learning at NVIDIA, told Access that the cost of compute is far beyond the costs of the employees. His comments challenge the growing belief that layoffs combined with AI adoption automatically improve profitability. Essentially, it implies that human labor might be more cost efficient. This is not an isolated case. As per reports, Uber exhausted its entire 2026 AI budget by April itself due to the costs incurred on Anthropic's Claude Code. Advisory firm Gartner estimated that IT spending across the world is likely to reach $6.31 trillion in 2026, which is up 13.5% from last year. This increase is being driven by sustained momentum across AI infrastructure, software, and cloud services, which includes the cost of AI subscriptions. This also comes as top companies across the world have announced massive layoffs linked to AI this year. While Oracle has already sacked over 20,000 employees, Citigroup is cutting an equivalent number of jobs by the end of this year. And this is not all. Remember, tech giant Meta laid off 8,000 employees. That amounts to almost 10% of its workforce. In May, Standard Chartered decided to cut over 7,000 jobs as it accelerated the use of AI, thereby impacting 15% of its back-office employees. Now, amid all of this, Anthropic co-founder Chris Olah issued a dire warning. He warned that artificial intelligence could displace human labor on a very large scale. He also pointed out the problem of AI gains not being shared globally and being concentrated in rich countries alone.
Real possibility that AI will displace human labor at a very large scale. If that happens, supporting those displaced will be a moral imperative of historic proportions. This task will be difficult enough, but I worry most dialogue misses an even harder challenge. AI development is concentrated in a handful of wealthy nations. How will we ensure that the gains of AI are shared globally? We do not have a mechanism for this. It is an unsolved problem.
With rising costs incurred on AI, will firms review their approach now towards job cuts? Or is this a trend that will be here to stay for a longer term? One thing is apparent. Companies with big IT budgets may need to prove returns on AI spending over a period of time. Well, this is something that we all should be very concerned about. Over 1 billion across the world are battling anxiety, depression, and other mental health conditions, often while trying to hold together their jobs, their families, and everyday lives. A major international study has now shed light on just how serious the situation has become. The study, published in the medical journal The Lancet, states that nearly 1.2 billion people worldwide were living with mental disorders in 2023. That marks a 95.5% increase since 1990. Researchers found the sharpest rise in anxiety and depression, which also emerged as the most common mental health conditions globally. Anxiety cases surged by 158%, while depression rose by 131% as compared to the 1990 levels. The study examined 12 mental disorders across 204 countries and territories. These included bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, anorexia, bulimia, dysthymia, conduct disorder, and developmental intellectual disability from unknown causes. Researchers warn that the world may now be entering an even more dangerous phase of worsening mental health conditions. The findings also showed clear differences based on age, gender, geography, and socioeconomic conditions. Most disorders were found to be more common among females. However, autism, ADHD, conduct disorders, personality disorders, and unexplained intellectual disability were more common among the males. Researchers say that mental disorders are increasingly becoming one of the leading causes of disability worldwide, especially among women and people between the ages of 15 and 39. Researchers said such peaks in the 15 to 19 age group were traditionally seen in the middle age. The report also highlights the lasting mental health impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Anxiety levels spiked during the crisis, and they remained high throughout 2023, while depression rates increased and never really returned to the pre-pandemic levels. The research, remember, was based on data from the global burden of diseases, injuries and risk factors. This was a study led by the University of Washington. Experts say several factors are now driving the crisis, including economic stress, conflict, trauma, social isolation, discrimination, food insecurity, and the lack of affordable health care. They also stressed on the importance of our sleep, exercise, social connection, and work-life balance in protecting our mental health. All right, shifting our focus to India, the President of India, Draupadi Murmu, honored distinguished achievers, including celebrities from the film fraternity, at the 2026 Padma Awards ceremony. A total of 131 awardees were honored this year, including 5 Padma Vibhushan, 13 Padma Bhushan, and 113 Padma Shri recipients, in what the government has described as a celebration of the people's Padma. Celebrated Indian star Dharmendra, who died in November of 2025, was honored posthumously at the ceremony. A visibly emotional Hema Malini received the Padma Bhushan on behalf of her late husband. The actor-turned-politician attended the prestigious event, accompanied by her daughter, Ahana Deol. Meanwhile, in a glorious moment for Malayalam cinema, Mammootty was named a Padma Bhushan awardee. The team Padayatra celebrated the honor on the sets of the film, marking a milestone in the superstar's cinematic journey. While playback singer Alka Yagnik received the Padma Bhushan, Bengali film actor Prasenjit Chatterjee was awarded the Padma Shri. Late actor Satish Shah was honored as well posthumously with the Padma Shri for his contribution to Indian cinema. But greatness does not only belong to superstars, politicians, or global icons. It also belongs to the quiet achievers who change lives without ever making headlines. Beyond the glamour and flashbulbs was 75-year-old Anke Gowda from Karnataka. Dubbed as the Pushtak Man, Anke Gowda is a former bus conductor who turned his love for books into a moment for knowledge. He founded Pustak Mani in Karnataka's Mandya. It is now recognized as the world's largest free-access library, housing more than 2 million books across over 20 languages. Another extraordinary story was that of K. Palnivel from Puducherry. He was awarded the Padma Shri for keeping the ancient Tamil martial art of Silbam live. From a small coastal village to the national stage, Palnivel dedicated his life to preserving a tradition that is both a sport and a cultural legacy. Well, if you've ever owned a pet, you have probably been tired to trying to understand what they're trying to say. A bark at the door, a cat meowing non-stop, or a dog staring silently at its food bowl. Pet owners have guessed what those sounds and expressions mean for years now. But that guessing game will soon come to an end, because a Chinese startup claims that artificial intelligence may just help bridge that communication gap. A China-based company has developed an AI-powered smart collar that claims to translate pet sounds into human language with up to 95% accuracy. This device is called PetiChat, and it has been developed by Hangzhou-based startup Meng Xiaohui. It is powered by Alibaba's Cloud's Qwen AI model. Now, the smart collar uses built-in microphones, motion sensors, and accelerometers to analyze a pet's vocal sounds, body movements, and behavioral patterns. The company says the system has been trained on millions of pet vocal samples to identify different emotions and responses. In simple terms, essentially, the device attempts to interpret what a pet may be feeling, whether it is excited, hungry, anxious, or just seeking your attention. The collar weighs just 27 grams, and it connects wirelessly to a handheld device that displays the AI-generated translations. The product is priced at around 799 yuan, which is roughly over $117. The product has already generated massive online interest, with thousands of pre-orders ahead of its official release later this month. While the idea may sound a little futuristic, remember this is not the first attempt that has been made to translate pets' communication. Japan introduced a device called Bowlingual more than 2 decades ago. It classified dog barks and basic emotional categories. Later, mobile apps such as Meow Talk also attempted to interpret cat vocalizations. But the latest device uses modern AI models and behavioral data to go a step further. It moves from simple sound detection to context-based interpretation. But questions, of course, will remain about how accurate such translations can really be. After all, animals do not communicate in human language, and much of their behavior depends on context, on movement and training that they received over a period of time. Well, all is fair in love and war, and to some, sport is war. But do you think doping is fair? Well, the organizers of the Enhanced Games certainly think so, as the first edition of this unique sporting event was held at a lavish, purpose-built arena in a Las Vegas casino parking lot. Well, Enhanced Games for some and the doped Olympics for others. It is basically an international sporting event where athletes are allowed to use performance-enhancing drugs without any fear of retribution. That's right. They are allowed to dope, but within a quote-unquote regulated environment. So essentially, it is a level playing field, which is the basic principle of sport. Ever since the idea was proposed, it has, as expected, faced major backlash from sporting bodies and WADA. To health experts, many have warned that several of these substances that are being used could lead to life-shortening or even fatal consequences. But Enhanced Games, officials say, all medications used here are approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. In fact, the parent company, Enhanced, sells many of the substances used by its athletes to the general public. Donald Trump Jr. and billionaire Peter Thiel were among the investors in this event, where 42 athletes competed across swimming, athletics, and weightlifting. Around half of them were Olympians. The head of the Enhanced Games had predicted multiple world records would be broken, but only one fell at the multi-million-dollar single-day event. Greek swimmer Christian Golomev broke the men's 50-meter freestyle world record at this divisive event. His time of 20.81 seconds, which is not considered official, came in the final event of the night in Las Vegas. Sparing the blushes of the organizers, Golomev, who was also wearing a synthetic supersuit, long banned at events such as the Olympics, went faster than Australia's Cameron McEvoy, who set the previous mark of 20.88 seconds in March. Golomev not only banked $250,000 for winning the race, he's also earned a $1 million bonus for breaking the world record. Now, more than a dozen personal bests were set, including several by athletes who came out of retirement. U.S. swimmer Cody Miller rolled back the years to win the men's 50-meter breaststroke. Britain's Ben Proud won the men's 50-meter butterfly in 22.32 seconds, which is just 0.05 off the world record. The men's 50-meter backstroke was won by Hunter Armstrong in 24.21 seconds, with the clean swimmer defeating two rivals who had taken performance-enhancing drugs. On the track, meanwhile, American former world champion Fred Kerley won the 100 meters in 9.97 seconds, which is well short of his personal best of 9.76. Kerley, remember, was banned from world athletics competition for 2 years for failing drug testing protocols, had predicted that Usain Bolt's world record of 9.58 seconds would be destroyed. But his time would have placed him last at the Paris Olympics 2 years ago, where he actually won a bronze medal. All right, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas. Thank you very much, as always, for joining us tonight. Bye-bye. Good night.
WION India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One. From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
In this rapidly changing world, is your health keeping pace? Best practices and breakthroughs busting the hype with real insights. The timeless power of yoga and ancient healing. Good food, good mood. Small steps, big impact. Your health matters. Only on WION World is One. Because nothing matters more.
Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is One.
In West Asia, every move shifts the world's balance. Wars, ceasefires, alliances, power never stands still. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Damascus to Doha, the West Asia Post cuts through the chaos to reveal the region that shapes the world. Because what happens in West Asia never stays in West Asia. This is the West Asia Post, the region's story, the world's impact.
Campaigns, elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power, only on WION.
In-depth coverage of global issues broken down into facts, figures, and simple words. Backed with analysis from field experts who truly matter, because we believe in decoding the real picture for you. So you get a much wider and deeper understanding of stories from around the world, a 360-degree analysis. An award-winning documentary series, week after week creating the maximum impact. Watch WION Wide Angle at these times on WION World is One.
elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power, only on WION.
A very warm welcome. You're watching the latest coming in from around the world. I'm Molly Gambhir. Let's get started with a quick look at the top stories making headlines. At least 4 people have been killed in Russian strikes on eastern Ukraine. 2 were killed in a Russian strike in the Kharkiv area. 2 others died in an attack on the Donetsk region. US President Donald Trump urged Muslim-majority nations, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Pakistan, to normalize ties with Israel as part of the emerging Iran peace deal.